Hi, I'm Christine from House of Smocking, and in this video we're going to cover steps 6 through to 11 of the Wright pattern by Children's Corner. So in the first video we did the linings of the pants and we did the side opening and the placket. So step 6 tells you to run 2 rows of stitches, just 1/8 of an inch from the top and then 1/4 of an inch there. So that's 2 rows of stitching, and that was done at size stitch length 4 on the sewing machine. So if I show you, I've done the 2 rows there, and then if you can just see, it was stitch row 4 for the length of the stitch, and then I've done that for both the front from the dot to the next tacking stitch, and then I've done the same on the back. So from there all the way across to there. Okay. The next stage is to attach the waistband. Now I couldn't find in the instructions about adding interfacing, but as you can see here I've just added interfacing to 1/2, and that's the back half of the waistband. So to attach the waistband, I've marked my centre, and then I've got the right side against the right side to my centre seam. So I pin it in the middle, and then I pin it on the outside edge, but leaving a seam allowance on the other side. And then I take my 2 threads from my trousers, the gathering threads, and then I pull the gathers up till it fits the waistband. And I've marked my centre of the waistband so that I get the same amount of gathers on both sides of the pants. So we keep pulling up until the gathers fit the pants. So now I have pinned and all the way across the waistband to the pants, and then spread out my gathers evenly. And then we're going to do a seam all the way across there, like that I've done on the front already, as you can see. So I'll just finish that off and then we'll show you the next stage on the waistband. So I've now done the seam for both the front and the back attaching the waistband, and then I've pressed it upwards. So the next step is to fold the waistband in half, and then we want to do a seam. We want to do a seam down there. We want to do that on all 4 pieces. Okay, so we're going to do a seam down that edge, and then we're going to do it the same for the other side and on the back. So now you can see that I've done the side seam of the waistband on all 4 edges, but then we want to trim down and we want to cut a point across to make it easier for turning inside out. So when we turn the waistband over, there we go, and we do that for the same side, the same at the other side. So we trim it down and trim the point off. Then we turn it to the right side, and then we're going to turn the seam allowance under. I'm going to turn that all the way along, underneath all the way along, and then we're going to slip stitch that in place, and we're going to do that the same for the front and the back. So now we've finished our waistband, the next step is to do the seam round the legs. So we want to run a seam all the way round from there to there, but to get at it you need to do one leg at a time, and you need to start with putting your seams together like that. And pin that. And then you need to feed it through, lining it all up as you go. And keep doing that till you get all the way to the other side. If you don't do it this way, then you won't be able to turn it to the right sides afterwards. So do one leg at a time. So just pin it all the way through. A little bit fiddly, but at least you know you're attaching the right seam to the right seam. So then you keep going all the way along, and do your seam all the way along. So I'll come back when I've sewn that on the machine. So I've done the seam on my first trouser leg and turned it to the right side and then pressed it. And you can see I've got a little bit of the pink showing because we cut the lining 1/4 inch less, so that when we folded it over you wouldn't have the crease, this join right on the edge, it'd be folded inwards. So to do the other leg we need to do the same thing as we did before. So we need to put these two seams together, and now it's going to get really fiddly. So we pin that there, and then as before we keep feeding it through and pin it as we go along. So you can feed it all, keep feeding it. And then just keep pulling it through as you pin till you get to the other end. Again, match your seams. And there we've got to the other end. And there you can see it's all a bit of a pickle, but you can make out our seam. So we do our seam all the way round. So there we have both legs finished and the seam done neatly and pressed flat. So the next stage is to do the actual leg casing. So we need to sew, it says 3/8 of an inch from the edge, from that tailor tack, all the way round to that tailor tack. Personally, I prefer to have 2 rows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 1 row right on the very edge, and then I'm going to measure my elastic and do another row just next to where the elastic is. So I'll do that and then I can show you what I mean. So now I've got my elastic casings. So it was from the tailor tack. So you can see now it's purely personal choice to have this second row. The pattern just calls for the 1 row, but I like to put the second row in, but it doesn't matter if you're not comfortable sewing that close to the edge, but it just gives you a neater finish when the elastic is pulled up. So I'm going to use this gadget, which has a hook on the end. It's actually for ribbon. And you're going to see come to focus. There you go. But I'm going to pop this into the trouser leg. And then I'm going to put the elastic and catch that onto the hook. Okay, and then flop that over. And then we're going to pull that back. But I only want the elastic to pull through to that point, to stop there, so don't pull it all the way through. And you can actually see inside where the elastic wants to stop. And you can also feel it. So just pull it through till it comes to just past your stitching line. And then you sew a seam down there to stop the elastic pulling all the way through. And then when you've done that one, I'll just put a pin in that to stop it pulling through. You do with the same with the other end. So you can see what's there. And don't let go of it. And we'll put a pin in there to hold it while we do another row of stitches across there to hold it. So now we've finished our elastic casing and we've got our elastic in, and I've just stretched it so it pulls along evenly, and you can see how the second row of stitching just gives it a nice sharp edge. So that's the legs. So the last part of this is the crotch, finishing the crotch. Now it gives you 2 versions and of option to finish this. The first one is to turn in the seam allowance. Open that plate. And then you can either machine sew that down. Okay, just like that. Or you could slip stitch the along the edge. Or the other option is to put a little button band on. And to do that, we've got a piece of fabric which is 2.5 inches wide by just wider than the actual piece for the seam allowance. So we put right sides together and we sew those 2 together. Okay. So we sew a seam straight across there. So I've sewn my seam across the top and then folded it over and pressed it flat. So the next thing to do is the same as we did for the waistbands, is we fold it over, allowing for a seam allowance. And we're going to sew a seam down there, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. And then we're going to sew a seam down there. So now I've done my 2 seams, you can see there. I'm going to trim off as we did before. Just trim that seam down and then across at an angle. And then the same for the other side. That just takes the bulk out of the corners for when you turn it to the right side. So then we want to turn it to the right side, pushing our corners out. And then we want to fold under. And then we're going to slip stitch. I'm going to sew across there. Okay. So here we have the finished button bands. So what happens is you pop them over like that, and you can put either poppers or buttons, buttonholes and poppers, or yeah, I think that's probably the best one. Poppers would be very quick and easy. Obviously by putting the extra band on, it's giving you slightly wider legs, but if you want to take that up a bit when you attach the binding, you can do to make the legs a bit tighter. But it all depends on the size of your child as well. So there we have the Wright patterns, pants by Children's Corner. Hope this has helped you. To finish off, if we do buttonholes where the markers are, both front and back, and then they should match the buttons on the shirt. Thank you for watching.